at Canada, the origins of Canada through art history. So to begin, I'd just like to take a few seconds to ask the group some ideas about what you think the perception of Canada is around the world, or what the perception of Canada has historically been. I mean images, ideas, stereotypes, and attitudes, etc. So maybe just throw them out there as they come into your head.
Vast, cold, wild.
Okay, vast, cold, wild. Okay, so geography. Yeah. What about in terms of politics, history, etc.?
Lately we've been
Tolerance.
on fossil
Pardon?
today.
Tolerance.
Tolerance. Okay.
I heard about our
something-
recent performance of climate change meetings, fossil of the day, or fossil,
So like kind of outdated.
yeah.
Okay, outmoded, outdated. Okay. What about in terms of military, or how does Canada is perceived in terms of military, or in terms of military aggression, or not?
Well, traditionally peacekeepers, maybe?
Would you all agree?
Outside Canada or in Canada?
Both, either.
Yeah, I think inside Canada, outside Canada, not so much.
I think
Okay,
it's
so there's
changing too.
and you're pointing to a divergence between, yeah, how we're perceived internally as opposed to externally. Okay, so great. These are all important ideas to keep in mind as we begin to look at this amazing painting. Yeah, thanks, I guess, yeah. Okay, so in that sense, I'd like to turn it over to Gail, who will introduce to us all this work of art.
Okay, I'm not going to talk about this painting as art, but rather think about image, okay? And how many images do you see in a day? Have you thought about what you're looking at? Now, in the teaching of art history, it's not so much about teaching what is beautiful, but rather, how does one become visually literate? Do you know what you're looking at when you look at an image? Like this by Benjamin West, who lived from 1738 to 1820. The Battle of Abrahams is the name of this painting. It happened in the year 1759. But Benjamin did not paint this painting until 1770. Often we see images, especially photographs, as being truth, as being reality. And in that lineage, Benjamin West presented this work, actually did it 4 times, as the truth about the plains of Abraham. And this is a category called history painting, and was considered by the Academy of that day to be the highest form of art. Okay. West made a claim that this was a truth, but any image that has been intervened by a human being should never be considered objective, but always subjective, and to your emotions as well as to me, the presenter. Each image carries multiple meanings, and okay, is it the truth about Canada and what happened on the plains of Abraham? And in each image, there are multiple ways of reading it. And Curtis here will present the next slide,
Okay,
the
I'd like to,
military aspect.
yeah, I'd like to provide a little bit of depth to the picture that you're seeing, because that's in effect a snapshot of a significant moment in Canadian history, a founding moment in Canadian history, really. The conflict occurred in and around September 13th, 1759, and it involved Canada's portion, North American portion of the 7 Years' War that was taking place in Europe, really, which was really the First World War. Now, there are decisions made in the mother countries at the time, France and Great Britain, that contributed to ultimately to the result that took place, as you're watching here, the beginning of the end of New France. Louis XIV, the presiding king in France, was somewhat laissez-faire in his commitment to his war effort in the New World, and as a result did not support convoys, new troops to any great degree, whereas the change in government in England, in Great Britain with Pitt, he chose a different route, and so as a result, they had a much stronger response than New France, and that would bear fruit as it progressed on. It was General James Wolfe and General Louis Montcalm who were the commanders that were in charge of their respective their armies, their battalions. Montcalm was secreted away in a naturally protected position in Quebec City, in effect protecting the governing New France. Wolfe was in a position where he had the surrounding areas, and in effect laid waste to those areas, cut off the supply lines to Montcalm, cut off their ability to gain extra arms, and effectively was starving them out. But nevertheless, it was almost a suicide mission to try and approach from the St. Lawrence, from the Anse du Filon, because he could be seen from all points. Very, very difficult circumstance. There's a little bit of cloak and dagger in how it actually evolved, because when the decision was made, Wolfe had launched a double false offensive, if you will, on two different points, far away from where the final skirmish took place, and caused alarm in Montcalm's camp, where he ended up sending off troops to deal with those minor skirmishes that ended up being, in effect, nothing, opening them up to limited resources when the conflict finally arose. And so when Wolfe made the decision to to assemble his troops in the Anse du Foulon, there was a 300-foot embankment that they were required to climb, and it was at night, and he was leading 5,000 troops. And as they arose, the night sentries of Montcalm challenged the people as they were coming over the hill, basically. And he had one of his soldiers that spoke fluent French and said, "Oh no, we're just a supply group. You don't have anything to worry about here." And in fact, their entry and their ability to come on was virtually unopposed because of this little cloak and daggerish maneuver. So it's interesting, and I mean, Wolfe is characterized, especially in Great Britain, as one of the great strategic leaders. And his assumptions about how Montcalm would respond were fundamental to how the event eventually played out. There would be no battle. If Montcalm chose to stay secreted in his position, there would be no battle, and Wolfe would be slaughtered. Nevertheless, he counted on the arrogance of the French, and they came down out of their secretive position, and the battle began. And there's some famous strategic decisions again that were made on that day. The battle, which in fact took less than an hour. Wolfe had his commanders in a small column drive a stake 40 yards ahead, and he told his people, "You will not fire until they cross the 40-yard line." Now, in those days when conflicts arose, it was often in wide, narrow columns where they would fire from 100 yards and greater at the opposing enemies. And so, in that particular case, as you're looking, you can see all the red coats and what eventually evolved. But what happened is the French were sensing victory because they weren't getting any response, and so they started to attack. And Wolfe held his people and held them. They didn't fire. Wait. until they were within 40 yards, and then it was one massive response with the musket, and dropped a good portion of the French that were advancing, and then they dropped to their knees. The next person would move into place, and then they responded and virtually decimated the army. But if you can imagine the discipline and how difficult it must have been for Wolfe's troops to stand there as their compatriots were falling beside them, standing there with their muskets and not being able to respond. It's a remarkable point in military history in our country. So shortly after that, Wolfe died in the battle. Both were critically injured, and Montcalm died a short time later. But the battle that here was really the birthplace of Canada as we know it.
Here we have a kind of a piece of not truth, but rather kind of propaganda about the English victory over the French. And those of you who remember the news from last year about the controversy of the enactment, you see that this image is still very relevant to us today. And the truth about the truth is that there is nothing truthful in this. Wolfe did not die on the battlefield, and none of these actors were actually there. And in fact, Benjamin extracted £100 from each person who wanted their portrait painted in this. And so, for English Canada, this is one of our great paintings and one of the great monuments that we pass on to our children and to our ancestors. Thank you.